Quick note before this video starts, a lot more mentions of Chicago have come up ever since the Edge of Fate reveal. However, I recorded all this before, and I just didn't manage to get it out in time. So I wanted to mention this at the very beginning. Yes, I have indeed seen that the elevated train or L train of Chicago is included within some of the shots of the gameplay teaser, and I also wanted to make it very clear that yes, I've seen the one still frame from the trailer of Lodi falling through the skyline of what looks like Chicago with a collapsed tower there. So yeah, Chicago is definitely of relevance. I still don't think it's going to be a playable destination. We seem to have Kepler as a playable destination, but it seems like there's a lot more relevance to it, and therefore this video still has some weight to it. I'm not discussing a lot of that as it stands in this, but yeah, wanted to give you all this quick disclaimer. I do know what's in there. I have seen. I've also seen some potential spoilers related to the collector's edition on the first page that people were able to transcribe somehow, which is insane, because of the image that exists of it on the Bungie store. So like, that's mad, but like, yeah, let's just put it this way. Chicago is definitely relevant, and so I wanted to release this video. So, on to the actual start of this thing. Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, we're going to do a relatively quick video here today about Edge of Fate and a few bits that came along with basically the stuff that's come in this periphery. It goes down a bit of a weird rabbit hole, and it was pointed out to me in the comments section the other day. Big thanks to Alchemist, by the way, for bringing such a fascinating topic to my attention. It all starts here with the Edge of Fate teaser. Bungie put out a slightly edited version of it on socials later, which instead of reading Chiago in the top right, reads Chicago, which is great because Chiago returns nothing, but Chicago returns a bunch of stuff. It's really neat that it's been changed, but it also opens up an absolute ton of theories. I wanted to go through some really interesting connections here and just look at them and how they all seem to converge on Haka, Chicago, maybe Clovis Bray, and gravity? Interesting stuff. Let's start from the very top. This all swung into focus thanks to the notes from the Aeon archives. This was attached to the recent Chessboard ARG and a site that released alongside it called aeonarchives.net. It's really cool, go ahead and check it out for yourself if you haven't, I'll leave a link in the description. It's basically been the teaser that's leading us to Edge of Fate, Rite of the Nine, and the next Saga of Destiny. And it starts off with us reading the About Us section, or Special Input 001. Let's read that really quickly. The Apollo Intertemporal Observation Network notes and logs data on time dilation and other anomalies across the visible universe, separating the chaff of normal light-speed travel time from other more serious mismatches. This is slow but meticulous work, requiring extreme patience and sharp observation. Successful employees are expected to be willing to check the same work many times over, and to perform the same experiments in excess of hundreds of times. There is a place where the numbers do not match. We have seen it. We will see it. You can follow this up with some other bits and pieces that are of relevance, including a place in 002 where they state where they were founded, except that code is now corrupted. And, well, by the end of this I'm going to wonder if that is indeed Chicago in Special Input 002. But the other bit that I want to point out is Special Input 008, which is denoted as access codes, and is, as typical for the Aeon archives, nothing to do with access codes. It reads as follows. Special Input 008. Certain trans-Neptunian objects cluster in ways not explicable by the gravity asserted on them by currently known solar bodies. If, however, there were another planet-sized object obscured from our sight in some manner, the gravity it would exert would explain the tilting and the clustering of these objects. In fact, we can calculate the size of the planet required down to the message ends here probably due to corruption, but we can't really tell. The intent of the Aeon Initiative is really clear from these two entries, though. They're measuring differences in space-time, and as a result they're also measuring gravity and gravitic anomalies to an extent. And that's due to the nature of gravity's relationship to light and space-time, and, well, light-speed travel. Light itself cannot escape gravity, it is inevitably something that is affected by it. That's why light disappears into a black hole, even it going at the fastest speed we can imagine, where protons are able to go faster than anything else recorded in the universe. Yeah, even that can't escape the gravity of a black hole. The important bit is that this was even mentioned because the manipulation of gravity and the experimentation with it is a theme here that is being brought up constantly. So far, that means we have two things. We have the top right of the Edge of Fate teaser, which now doesn't read Chicago, it reads Chicago. And we have the Aeon initiatives noting that they were measuring gravitic disturbances alongside all sorts of changes in the fluctuation of spacetime. Where do we go from here? Well, let's take a look at that idea of gravity first. Gravity experimentation is indeed a theme that has been brought up in Destiny before, and you know what? It brings us to the strangest of places. An exotic that was released in Destiny 2 Vanilla. An exotic which has now received plenty of buffs, is pretty popular, and is quite memeable. I am indeed referring to Graviton Lance, and yes, Moira, aka Destiny the Meme, this one's for you. Graviton Lance is a place where gravitic weapons are mentioned, and it's explicitly mentioned that there are some other interesting details that slip into all of this. The lore tab of Graviton Lance is a conversation between two Guardians, and it tells us that the weapon in question fires singularities, which the Guardian literally describes as miniature bullet-sized black holes. What's more, the Guardian was apparently led to the weapon by their ghost, and they found it in the swamps of old Chicago in an old tunnel somewhere. So we have gravitic disturbances from Aeon, the note that there is Chicago in the top right of the teasers, and then a gun that ties them both together. It's getting a bit weird out here. But then there are a bunch of other questions. The weapon was apparently just found in the middle of the swamps of old Chicago for good reason, but it supposedly fires singularities. What? And also, who built this thing? There are even weirder links that go out there even further though, and from here it's worth noting that we can search for Chicago generally and see what other lore references are returned. And as it just so happens, there is a weapon that does indeed mention not just lore references to do with gravity, but also the same foundry that might have been involved with some of the other nonsense that leads into this. The weapon in question actually comes from Vesper's host. It's the exotic from that dungeon. The foundry in question that made it was Haka. The weapon itself is something that's only recently been rediscovered in the modern era of Destiny 2. It's the Icebreaker. Again, you can get this from Vesper's host nowadays, and back in the old days it was a weapon with infinite ammo that regenerated over time. It made the original Nightfalls actually doable in vanilla Destiny. So let's not beat around the bush, this was a powerful weapon, and Bungie built the lore tab on this thing deliberately. They knew that people were going to be looking at this thing. Anyway, the new lore on the Icebreaker is from the perspective of a Guardian called Shayura. If you've played Trials, you know that name. Yes, it's from that particular Trials fire team whose story is being constantly told in the background. I'll need to do some videos on them at some point. Their lore is quite extensive and it's got some fascinating tales to it. That being said, the lore tab of the Icebreaker reads as follows. Please replace these components if use causes fatal damage. Heatsink, magazine, operator. The foundry is silent now. Shell casings litter the floor. They clatter away from the boot falls of the warlock Shayura as she weaves between the downed chassis of combat frames branded with the sigil of the Haka foundry. Security is disabled, Shayura says over an encrypted channel. She's quick to cross the foundry floor, checking the disabled frames one by one as she progresses to a sealed vault door. The door's surface is marked with a glyph unfamiliar to her. It looks like a fish hook or perhaps an anchor. Is this what we're looking for? Confirmed. That's the same symbol on the weapon the Vanguard recovered from Seraph Station. Golden Age, possibly older. Shayura extends one arm, wreathed in solar fire, and manifests a searing white dawn blade that she uses to cut through the door in a single stroke. Half of the vault door crashes to the floor and falls to the side, sizzling on a glowing hot edge. Shayura then floats into the air, drifting through the partial opening. We need any records you can find, anything where Braytech and Haka overlap. Shayura dispatches her ghost to scan rows of server racks containing decompiled engrams. Nearby weaponry is mounted on vault walls. Prototype firearms, alien weapons, unrecognizable technology from across Sol. A sniper rifle of human design catches her eye. A red and grey body with some kind of thermal plating on the barrel. Her fingertips brush over the serial number stenciled on it. X032782. It's an icebreaker. She remembers when the Vanguard commissioned this design from Haka, remembers when it was outlawed for being dangerous and unfit for duty. The design was later stolen and replicated. Hefting the icebreaker from the wall, Shayura turns to watch her ghost scan and download Haka archives. Find what you're looking for? Skimming. I see some interesting details. Haka's Golden Age predecessor had a terrestrial office in what was once the city of Chicago. They were involved in the development of gravity-based weapons. No Braytech connections yet. Shayura freezes. Chicago. The tombs below old Chicago haunt her periphery. Every ambient noise in the derelict foundry becomes a threat. She pushes past the fear, past the panic. That isn't now. What does Chicago have to do with anything? I'm not sure, the handler on the other end of comms says. But whatever it is goes back a long, long time. So there you have another part of the mystery. The Haka predecessor, known as Haka Heavy Industries, was responsible supposedly for creating gravitic weaponry in the Golden Age, and it just so happens that they had an office in Chicago. And again, Graviton Lance, a weapon that supposedly fires many singularities, aka gravitic manipulation, was found in the tunnels of old Chicago by a Guardian. So things are starting to make sense, everything is linking together somewhat. And it now figures that maybe we can see that Haka Heavy Industries might have made Graviton Lance. Cool! But there's more questions that are arising from this. Namely, I think the important one is then, how does this link in with Edge of Fate again? Maybe it links in with the Aeon Initiative, and maybe it links in with Clovis Bray. After all, Haka Heavy Industries did work with Clovis Bray, and when Astrea, the AI on board Vesper Station, notes the Aeon Initiative, she describes them as siblings. This could mean that they have AI involved in them, which she considers to be her siblings, or alternatively, it could just reference the fact that they were another Clovis Bray funded project, or another thing that Clovis Bray created. It's not clear. Either way, she describes the Aeon Initiative as siblings, which means the Aeon Initiative might be linked to Clovis Bray, and Clovis Bray is also linked in with Haka Heavy Industries, and we know that thanks to another link that brings us all back to another description in Icebreaker's lore tab. You remember the vault that Shayura just broke into? It's described as having a symbol on it. A symbol that looks a little bit like an anchor or a fishhook. A symbol which was also found on a weapon recovered from Seraph Station. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to let you know, we have seen that symbol before. We have that weapon in our inventories if we played Season of the Seraph. And you know what it was on the side of? A prototype weapon from the Haka predecessor, Haka Heavy Industries, that used experimental alloys synthesized from materials recovered from the K1 anomaly on the moon that is now a Crucible map. I give you the Revision Zero. And the symbol that looks like a fishhook or an anchor, the same symbol that was on side of the vault door Shayura broke into, yeah, it's there on the side of the magazine. Something that looks like either an anchor or a fishhook. Ladies and gentlemen, things coming full circle here is quite satisfying when you get to sit there and literally point it out. I don't always get moments like that. This is really cool. Anyway, Revision Zero is a rabbit hole that I've jumped down before, but as far as it pertains to Haka Heavy Industries and all of the other topics we've been discussing, I think it matters because of the materials that were discussed in this weapon's lore tab. And again, I say that this weapon was supposedly created from strange alloys. I can't remember if that's actually true. Regardless, the alloys are discussed within the weapon's lore tab, and they have been recovered from the K1 anomaly. This is interesting because I say recovered. They were actually recovered and then synthesized into something. Creating weapons from them was something that Clovis Bray tried to do, and that they then sent on to their partners at Haka Heavy Industries. And I think it's really important to understand that just describing these materials as polyphasic in the first place is a bit of a complicated one. Basically, that means that they were able to change. They had more than a single state. They had many phases. This is important because it means they were really hard to analyze and measure, but also if stuff that we've been looking at before with quantum physics and its possible relations to the Nine, the chess game, and a bunch of other things are true, then maybe there's a connection there. After all, this might go down the idea of a quantum state for something. but I don't want to involve quantum physics in here just yet because we don't know that for a fact, and also I don't want to break everyone's brains, my own included. More importantly though, let's look at something we do know a bunch about, the K1 anomaly itself. For those of you who don't know what this is, go to the anomaly crucible map. You see the big dodecahedron in the middle that looks like an engram? Yeah, that's K1. That is the anomaly itself. The actual form of this thing is not the dodecahedron plates surrounding it, it's what's in the middle of them, a perfectly smooth black sphere, which was discovered floating in place at the K1 site. The reason that this was worrying was that what could be measured from K1 told us that the orb inside was roughly the size of a wrecking ball, but it had a disproportionately large mass. And I need to be really clear about this. This is not just, oh, it was slightly bigger. This thing was gargantuan in terms of its mass. Like, it was so massive, in fact, that if ever it stopped floating and it hit the moon, even though it was just hovering a few meters above it, the impact of this hitting the moon would destroy it and cause incredible damage to Earth in the process. And this thing was floating, and yet it had an incredibly large mass. I don't know how many other ways I can spell it out, but yeah, this thing, it's a gravitational anomaly. So we have some interesting elements here, and let's just put all of this into an interesting potential timeline. Clovis Bray and the Chinese Aerospace Division discover K1, a massive gravitational anomaly on the moon. The materials that they can synthesize from what they recover from K1 are sent to Harker Heavy Industries. Amongst the properties of them, they have this ability to be polyphasic. That one's weird and unexplained, but the important thing is that Harker Heavy Industries starts potentially looking into synthesizing weapons from them. Supposedly, Harker Heavy Industries was working on creating gravity weapons, and they had an office in Old Chicago. Then, years later, a Guardian just so happens to stumble upon a weapon of that description that manipulates gravity in Old Chicago. The bigger pieces of the puzzle are there, but how they fit into Edge of Fate is the really interesting one. The Aeon Initiative seems to be tied into all of this on the sidelines, and it's not clear how they've been fitting into this in the broader sense of everything. The trail is there, and there's no reason otherwise why Bungie is sitting there and dropping the name Chicago in their teaser. It is so strange that it's even there, and this is what we know about it thus far, and it feels like it all fits. Chicago's story is tied in with gravity and the manipulation of it, and the way that time works around everything as well. The material quality that has been described from K1 may be polyphasic and maybe a little bit undetermined, but we can indeed tell that it was indeed an artifact that was capable of manipulating gravity somehow. And you know, this might just lead to some interesting lore on the side, but ultimately, I think this means we still need to be looking out for references to Chicago in the future to understand what's going on. The coolest thing about all of this, though, is it's a new story that we've got in our hands, and it's a bunch of cool mysteries that have just unfolded before us, and it leads us to a bunch of different questions. Not many of them have answers, but we have enough to speculate and guess. I just need to say, again, this feels like the old Destiny 1 lore, where we had ideas of what might be going on, but no one really knew what was going on. That's exciting. With that in mind, go ahead and let me know what you think in the comments section down below, and I also want to go ahead and just leave you with one other thing. I wonder if Old Chicago is a destination we might visit at some point in the future. If that is the case, awesome, cool, but also be aware, because Old Chicago and the tunnels underneath it are supposedly home to a ferocious predator that was capable of hunting down Guardians in the terrible darkness below its streets, in the tombs beneath. This creature is unidentified as of this time, but apparently it was intelligent enough to lure Guardians to its hunting grounds and to pick off individual fire teams one by one. There's some people speculating, back in the old days, myself included, that this might have just been one of the Scorn that was incredibly intelligent. But I don't think so anymore. The fact that Bungie's bringing this to the forefront, and the fact that it's something that is still not easily described, yeah, I don't think that this is something they're going to leave hanging as just a Scorn. I'm not sure about it though. Either way, let me know what you think of all of this and the Chicago mystery down in the comments section below. I'm fascinated to hear what you all have to say. And if you want more Destiny content, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But, as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, has been quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Per Audacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.